Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's podcast, I have got Derek McGlashan. Now it's Dr. Derek McGlashan, I'm going to say as well. He's the director of Saltire Sustainability Ltd. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Liz.
So we spoke, it's quite a few months ago now, isn't it? And we kind of had a really long chat, a really interesting chat. And I just want to give the folks who are listening and watching a little bit of an idea about you, what you do. You work in the decarbonisation of shipping. Now, that in itself, it just opens up very many. We've had conversations around this anyway, but I know that you, so like I said to you before we started recording, you are the first person to come on the podcast who's actually talking about the decarbonisation of shipping. How the heck did you get into it? Please tell us.
Well, really it started in ports by complete fluke, and I'd been working as an academic. I guess the title that you introduced me gave that away, and someone that I'd worked with in the past tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This port's looking for a little bit of help on something called the environment that they don't really know anything about. Can you help them?" And I said, "I suppose I could," and I went along and did a little bit of work for them and gave a presentation to the board of directors, and that wasn't the smoothest meeting I'd ever had, if I'm honest.
Okay.
And anyway, very long story short is, I helped them out over a number of years, occasionally, intermittently, and then eventually they offered me a full-time job. And I worked there for over 20 years. And eventually ended up leading health, safety, environment, sustainability and regulatory matters. And then eventually decided it was time to set up on my own and see what else I could learn from other places. So started in ports, have kind of dabbled in the wet bit on and off, but obviously ports are that interface between what happens on land and what happens on sea.
I've never heard it being classed as the wet bit. I've got to say, that tickled me as it was then. Goodness me. So right, okay. So you were an early adopter, weren't you? So as you just said, you started working in this number of years ago. Where do you start looking at the decarbonisation in that area? It just kind of blows my mind when I think about it. And obviously you've talked to me before this, and I just want you to try and put some context to it, because you were talking before we started recording about the decarbonisation of things like cruise ships and container ships. I mean, they're like floating cities anyway, aren't they? How do you even start how do you look at this, and what's what do you need to think of if you're trying to do this?
Well, if we go back to the last century when I started in this game, I started by sitting down with my then boss and said, "I can save you a fortune by cutting your electricity bill if we just do a few small tweaks to how we do things." And he said, "Not interested."
Oh, seriously? Oh my God! Did you tell him what the small tweaks were, and he said no then, or did he just say no to start off with?
He said, "Not interested." I said, "Look, I reckon that I could take a good 25% off your electricity bill and probably similar off your diesel bill." And he said, it's peanuts." He said, "Not interested. It's just not worth the aggro." He says, "Just go and do something else. Find something else to do."
God.
Fast forward about 5 years, the attitude was very different.
I can imagine. Yeah. You know that thing that you said you could do for us? Would you like to come back and do it, please?
Well, exactly. So you start with the easy wins, obviously, and we started looking at lighting, and so like many, and then heating and hot water, and lots of buildings are designed and built by the same organisation. And so, there are I've encountered some peculiar vested interests through my career.
Okay.
And one building in particular was just very strange. The heating was overspec'd phenomenally. The windows were quite bizarre. And I later discovered that the building had been designed around the windows, which had been left in the yard from another job.
God,
And
that's a bit weird.
and lots of windows, so it must have been an enormous job. And the boilers were completely overspec'd, and they had what they called a recirculating hot water system. So these are gas boilers powering the hot water, which meant that the taps were hot at all times because the pipe runs were enormous, which meant that all the water in the hot water system was running like a radiator continually on the off chance that you turned a tap on. And so we have the gas bill in that building by disconnecting all the hot water taps from the gas boiler and just putting in a local little water heater that sat underneath the tap.
Oh, that makes sense. Flipping heck.
And then that was that halved the hot water bill. But then I couldn't understand why the heating was so phenomenal and the electricity was just bizarre. And the thermostat for the heater had been plastered into a wall.
Okay.
So if you can imagine two walls joining, the point at which this partition wall butted up against the main wall was where a thermostat was.
Right.
And so half the thermostat was visible and the other half was under plaster. Just no one had thought about, shall we just move this thermostatic valve a couple of centimetres another way, or leave a space. It was plastered in very neatly.
I bet.
But therefore it didn't work very well.
Oh, God.
And then in another large open space, there were 6 independent air conditioning units, all of which could be controlled by anyone in the room. So they were all competing with each other and with the central heating run off the gas. So it was no surprise that the electricity bill was phenomenal, and so was the gas bill.
Yeah.
So
was that in the port then? Was that in the port, in the buildings in the port?
That was in a building in a port, but you'll find the same in lots of other places too, where, particularly in the 1990s, early 2000s, people weren't as focused on energy efficiency. You didn't need EPC certificates, etc. No one was doing energy audits, and so when I dusted myself down after falling over, then we started to look at lots of other buildings and came up with lots of other ideas. And that's before we got into trialling different forms of lighting.
I was going to say, but like you, I don't know whether we should be jumping onto this straight away, because you would talk when we spoke over the phone ages ago. You were talking, and I did mention this before we started. You were talking about comparing decarbonisation of a ship to battery electric vehicles and EV charging, weren't you? So, and you were talking about the MVA. Now, that blew my mind. So can you just explain, when we're looking at decarbonisation of shipping, so cruise ships and container ships, what is the how can you actually compare the two? How, you explain it to me, but can you explain it to everybody else? Yeah,
sure. So you're a cruise ship, it'll depend on how big it is, obviously, and to some extent the weather. But it could take, say, between 3 and 20, maybe even more MVA. So to put that into context, 20 MVA would be a good-sized port with a good-sized industrial area.
So you're talking about a ship that's been electrified, so it's running on a battery, and it's taking to plug it in. It's taking the juice of a whole port. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no. It's not even that much.
Okay.
That's just to run what you would call the hotel load.
Oh, right.
So that's the heating, the lighting, moving ballast water about. If you move things on a ship, then you need to counter that with your ballast tanks,
Right.
otherwise it'll lean over. So you have pumps working and so on, and that's what uses the juice, as it were. This is just for hotel load when they're in port. So it's just to do the basic things that they need to do to keep it as an operating vessel.
Right, okay.
That's not even thinking of batteries to propel them.
Oh my God, I see what you're saying now. So not, right, because you were saying, weren't you, that there aren't many ships that have been electrified so far. So literally when it's in port, oh my God, I get what you're saying now. So when it's in port, just to keep it there without any passengers on, that's the amount of power that it's taking. Oh, that's not a small amount, is it really?
Well, it's not, and it's not the sort of amount that you can just flick a switch and it's there.
No.
And so there's potential to really stress your energy grid, because you're only taking that power when the ship's there, not when it's not there, obviously.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be there just when it's needed, which might be 20 days a year, maybe 60 days a year. But what if you've got 3 cruise ships in the same day?
Lots of ports do have that, don't they? The big ones.
Absolutely, yeah, indeed. And in fact, some that aren't that big. I'm a non-exec director at Cromarty Firth Port Authority, and that in terms of employee numbers, etc., is relatively small. However, we can have 3 cruise ships in a day. It's a huge area of water. You can have cargo ships in at the same time, and so they all have a hotel load while they're alongside, and so getting that energy to some of these potentially remote, in the context of the energy distribution grid area, is quite a challenge.
It sounds it. My God. So we were talking about kind of the problems with decarbonisation of shipping anyway, weren't we? Before we started, but I mean, is it possible to actually look at the whole decarbonisation of ships like that big? I know you mentioned to me hydrogen, didn't you? And I know that there's a lot of some people, there's a lot of skepticism about hydrogen, but but I've heard about it being used in sort of like big industry like this. Where do we stand with kind of, you've just explained now that when it's actually in port, this is the amount of electricity that it needs just to run, just to keep it going. So how do you actually electrify a ship then? How?
Well, I guess it's, do you electrify it or do you use something else? So if you look at the really big container lines, they all seem to be betting on methanol as their propulsion fuel. And so the really big lines have been placing orders for, I think it's about 19 or 20 of them on order now. And so these are your huge container ships.
Right, okay.
There are others who suggest that ammonia is a likely future fuel. It's more energy dense than hydrogen. And it comes with its own challenges as well. Hydrogen's probably most likely in inshore waters for vessels not transiting huge distances, because the energy density of hydrogen is quite poor in gaseous form, relative to hydrocarbons today. And then there are various transition fuels like LNG, for example.
Yes.
So a number of cruise ships have adopted LNG as a transition fuel, as a way to improve air quality and reduce emissions. Here that's a transition fuel.
Yeah.
And then when you get to smaller vessels again, here in the Thames. Well, I say here today I'm in Gravesend in the Port of London Authority's offices. So they've transitioned all of their own fleet of survey vessels and pilot vessels, etc., over to HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is a form of biodiesel.
Yeah.
Essentially, and so that's significantly reduced their carbon footprint. There's still some hydrocarbon in there; it's still a blend, but there's a large extent is from biofuels.
Yeah, so it's a lot smaller.
And so we've seen other operators in the Thames do something similar, but it costs more. So you have to be willing to pay for that benefit to the environment.
Yeah. And you were talking about there's some actual government grants or government grants and funding, didn't you? That's kind of available to help decarbonise ports and shipping.
Yeah, so the UK government took a lead on decarbonising ports and shipping, but more so the shipping piece at COP26 in Glasgow. Was that 2 years ago now, I guess? And they created the UK Shore office. Can't quite remember what that stands for at the moment, but anyway, so they have a pot of about £200 million to spend to assist the decarbonisation agenda in shipping, and they've released a number of funding calls over the last few years. Port of London was successful in gaining one of them to run a project called the Hydrogen Highway project, which is looking at a whole hydrogen ecosystem of generation of green hydrogen offshore at wind farms, transiting that with autonomous vessels into a port facility, and then its onward distribution and use case through an estuary. The estuary being examined being the Thames, but it's all theoretical, and so in theory could be applied to any similar setting.
Okay.
And the work package I've been most closely involved with has been working with regulators on the regulatory hurdles associated with hydrogen in ships, refuelling, or bunkering as it's known in the trade.
Okay.
And that starts to raise eyebrows about how far into a city can you have hydrogen fueled vessels, or can you transit hydrogen as a fuel? Because building pipelines is very expensive. It's cheaper to move that by sea, at least in the short term, until pipelines are built. So how far could you move that by sea to avoid needing to dig up lots of streets and install new pipes?
Because you were saying about the regulators were a little bit slow to move on this, didn't you? You said they were quite conservative with these new approaches.
Yeah, so I think the point here is that regulators are here to make sure that things are done in the right way, depending on what topic it is that they are regulating. So whether it's appropriate environmental hurdles, or whether it's appropriate from a safety perspective or from a community perspective, and generally people that work for a regulator are quite conservative. They like to follow rules because they enforce rules, and that's what they do, absolutely. And we should all follow the rules, obviously, and should know what those rules are before we apply to do things. But not everyone does, so regulators need to go through a process of checking to make sure. And when you've got novel technologies and novel ideas, that stretches the regulator because they've not had to deal with that before. And so there may need to be a process of learning or upskilling or additional resource, and that may or may not fit well with the prevailing financial climate in the public sector. And so where I think we are now is that lots of people want to see alternative fuels succeed and alternative technologies succeed. And I think the regulators are now realising that they need to upskill. I think some have known for a while, and they maybe had a challenge to find the funding to do that, or maybe it's find the skills to recruit them in.
Maybe to both.
Because this is this is new to everybody. It's new to those that are on the entrepreneurial side, and it's new for those that are the regulators. And so there's a bit of patience required with regulators. Of course, when you're doing something new and you're a change agent, and maybe someone who's a bit entrepreneurial, then you might not be overly patient with a slow, cautious approach.
I can imagine.
And so sometimes there can be some friction when you put people that are cautious and rule-bound in the same rule as entrepreneurial and impatient. And so we need to find a way through that. And that's part of the theory behind the Hydrogen Highway project, was to get all of these parties in a room and talk through what the hurdles are and what needs to change to make things better. And whilst we're not expecting laws to change as a result of these projects directly, we hope that what comes out of it will be, highlighting what enabling actions might need to take place.
I hope so. How far? So the Hydrogen Highway project, how far is it in? Moving? How long's it been going?
So it's been going for a little over a year, and it's a 3-year project.
Okay.
So we're at that stage now where we're in detailed workshops with the Health and Safety Executive and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency and the Harbour Authority. So there's 3 regulators there, and then various other interested parties and academics. In fact, I was presenting on the project with my colleague George, who's the project manager for the project and is doing a sterling job. And he said, it's my job to herd the cats. And then he said, "Oops, am I allowed to say that?" But actually, it's a really good analogy, because you've got that kind of entrepreneurial vision on one side. You've got regulators, albeit consultants, that work for the Health and Safety Executive. On another side, who are very good at saying here are the regulations and these things look risky, and then you've got academics who are saying, but this is a really good idea, this could be fantastic, and so you have all of these different perspectives all running in the one room, and so it can be interesting.
I bet for sure. Goodness me. Yeah. So you were also talking about a conversation that you had with Greenpeace at one point, didn't you? Yes. About barriers to decarbonisation. Just to explain a little bit about that, will you?
Yeah, so I guess the context is I was at a corporate event, and there was a chap. He seemed to be getting rather a lot of stick from someone, and anyway, I ended up speaking to him for a while, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I oversee sustainability for a port company, etc." And he was like, "Oh, all right, you're one of them, are you?" I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I work for Greenpeace. I organise direct action against big corporates like you." And I said, "But do we not want the same thing? But we're just going about it a different way. I'm influencing from within, trying to drive change and behaviour and habits, and you're doing it in a more direct way that has a different impact. And it's just, we probably each have the same ultimate goal. We're going about it in different ways. And, I wouldn't go about it the way you're going about it. I accept you've got a right to protest, and that's absolutely fine. It's annoying when I'm trying to go somewhere and you've, superglued yourself to the motorway, or you've, stopped trains running, etc. And, he explained that he felt this was the only way he could see change. And that, he felt that I was just a corporate slave just trying to stick with the status quo.
Okay.
So that was an interesting start, but I was up for a challenge. And so I said, "Well, look, it's not easy just waving a magic wand and decarbonising everything." And he said, "Well, you work for a port, thousands of sheds, they could all be covered in solar panels, you could generate the country's electricity." Well, maybe not the country's, but yes, there's a lot of roof space on sheds, and yes, you could put solar panels on them, but there are barriers to doing that. First of all, you need a grid connection, and that's not always easy. It's not as simple as you can get power in, therefore it can go out. You need to understand the metering processes that take place. And, then there are more kind of physical issues, like the weight of solar panels is not insignificant, and not all buildings were designed to take that weight.
No.
Buildings have to be designed to meet building standards, and so they've got to be able to cope with wind loading and the weight of snow and so on and so forth. But solar panels weren't factored into that at the time of the building regs for a lot of the, probably what you'd be best calling historic infrastructure in lots of our ports. And so he said, you can reinforce the roof. Like, you can, and that costs money, and that starts to make the economics of the solar panels a little bit more difficult. And, is that the core business case of an infrastructure provider that creates berthing space for ships and, distribution of goods? Is generating electricity really their core business function? Is that what they want to spend their money on, or do they want to spend their money on making that more efficient? Would it be better to buy that renewable energy in rather than create it on site? I said, then you've got the insurance problem. And he said, well, of course you can insure solar panels. Well, the issue is about, if you're drilling 10,000 holes in the roof of the shed, and you're storing £5 million worth of paper in that shed, what happens if there's a water leak? I can't maintain that roof if it's covered in solar panels. It's not easy to take the panels off and then fill up a hole that water's managed to come through that there was a screw fixing the solar panels in. So actually in the past I found that the insurers have had a hurdle and said, no, I don't think you should be putting solar panels on this roof. And so latterly we were getting to the stage where we were designing sheds to have solar panels. So we were designing them in at the start rather than retrofitting them. But you don't build a new shed every day.
No, you don't. No. Not multiple sheds either.
No, indeed.
And that costs a lot of money anyway, doesn't it? Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. So, but you did say that there has been a number of sheds that have had solar panels put on, didn't you?
Absolutely, and there are loads all over the country. And if you've got a product in your shed that's not water sensitive, then that's absolutely fine. If it's timber for battening for houses, or your decking for your garden or what have you, it's not the end of the world if there's a little drip of water. The owner of your your wheat that's going to be your breakfast cereal next month is probably not going to be quite so happy if water gets into the shed and damages their cargo.
And I suppose when you're looking at cargo sheds, it's not as if they're built, like you say, for kind of masses of masses of weight on the top. I'm just thinking myself, when I've been in a port and you see these port buildings, it's not that they look flimsy, but they don't look totally rugged enough to manage lots and lots of weight, I suppose.
Yeah, they're designed for their function, which is to provide a cover for the cargo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see, you've got me thinking about all this stuff now. My goodness, and I totally get it. I do want you to talk about some of the other sustainability projects you've been working on, though, because you talked to me about quite a few, haven't you? Like the floating pilot boats and fuel reduction and things like that. So, do you want to kind of just go into some of those?
Move on to that. Yeah. So you mentioned pilot boats. That's a really good example of where it required some initiative. So for years, I was trying to find someone who could help me identify methods to improve the fuel efficiency of our pilot boats. And there were various companies out there who would say, well, we can give you this anti-fouling paint and this will make life better, etc. But the vessels weren't really big enough for that to have a noticeable difference on their fuel efficiency. And eventually, I got bored of speaking to people who couldn't come up with answers, and I decided that we'd take measures into our own hands. And so,
I was going to say, just before you go on, Explain what a pilot boat actually is for the people who don't know it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so a pilot boat would take a pilot out to a larger vessel. What's a pilot? What's an airline pilot doing in a vessel? Yeah. So a pilot's someone who knows the local water well and is there to guide and advise the master or captain, as you would know them, of a commercial vessel through the waters, through the local waters, because they can't be expected to know every single waterway they visit. And so a pilot will board a pilot vessel, sometimes a helicopter, though pretty rare in the UK for a pilot to be dropped by a helicopter. But it does happen in some ports around the world. So they get on a small, fast craft, bit bigger than a speedboat, and they'll go out to a pilot boarding station, which is just essentially a little mark on your hydrographic chart. There's no infrastructure actually there. And the pilot boat will come alongside your larger vessel, and a ladder will be thrown down the side of the vessel, and the pilot will clamber up the side of the vessel and head to the bridge, and we'll advise the master on how to get there in the safest way. Check the passage plan to make sure it's appropriate. Make sure they've got the right navigational charts, etc. And may have to make the decision that the vessel's going no further if they don't have the right navigational charts and navigation aids on board, etc. So they've got that kind of role as, if you like, they're your mountain guide, but for the seas.
Okay, so they're your specialist, aren't they? With lots of specialist knowledge. Yeah. Okay.
Indeed. And they get tested extensively, and they'll go through scenario planning, and we've got simulators that they've got to show their knowledge and experience on before they're allowed to get out there and start piloting a vessel. And there are different classes of pilot depending on the size of vessel and the bits of water that they're transiting through and so on. So yes, it's quite a rigorous process. So that's the role of the pilot. And so the purpose of the pilot boat is to get the pilot out to the vessel that needs the pilot's assistance, really as quickly as possible, ultimately. The sooner they get out there, do the job and get back, the sooner they can do the next job. And so these pilot boats are small and fast, and will go out and go alongside. And so they were using a lot of fuel, and I felt there must have been a better way to do it. And so, using the car analogy of there are optimum revs for your car, and your fuel efficiency is driven by the revs of your car. And if you're in fifth gear travelling at 60 miles an hour, it's more efficient than if you're in second gear travelling at 40 miles an hour and the engine's screaming, for example. Yeah. So we started taking a really close note of the amount of fuel that was used for each job, and the speed that the coxswain, the driver of the pilot vessel, travelled at to get out and back. And so, our pilot vessels could have a maximum speed, depending on the boat, of between 21 and 23 knots. And what we identified was, depending on the vessel, the optimum speed was between 17 and 18 knots. So, we took a few, 3-4 knots off the top speed. And it was obviously still there should you need it in heavy weather. Sometimes you need to put the foot down, as it were. Yeah. And so once the crews started travelling at these speeds, we saw fuel efficiency improve by we reduced our fuel usage by a third. That's good, which is phenomenal, really phenomenal. And basically that added 3 minutes to the journey to get the pilot out to the ship. Which maybe meant the last dregs of the cup of tea weren't drunk before getting out. But there's always a cup of tea on the bridge of the ship.
Exactly.
But that was a really good process, and one that really drove confidence, because the workforce were involved in that, and they were really bought into it. They could see the benefit. They could see why they were doing it, and at the time, we were actually going through a process of saying, do we automate lighting and all sorts of other things? And I said, well, actually, do you know what? Let's capture this motivation and get and educate rather than automate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that drove lots more ideas from the staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to people, because I mean, the stuff that you're doing is massive infrastructure improvement, isn't it? Or change programs. I always say, talk to the people that you're working with, because if you just leave them out of
Absolutely.
it, then they're not going to be, embracing what the changes that you're trying to make. If they're in it and they can see it, and actually they're involved in it, then they're more likely to actually be on board and go, yeah, brilliant idea. We've got some ideas as well, and they can throw their hat in, can't they, as well?
Yeah, I mean, another example from that era was lighting, and perhaps not the biggest expense. But again, sheds need light, and workshops need light, and we were trying to work out whether to go compact fluorescence or LED, and this would have been in the mid noughties, so 2006, 2007, somewhere about then, and so I'd persuaded my colleagues in the Scottish part of the organisation to go with LEDs. And my colleagues in the English part of the organisation preferred compact fluorescence because they were better understood.
Yeah, as they do.
And so we agreed that we would do two projects and we would see what turned out best. And both were excellent. Both gave better light levels and lower energy bills, and that was great. The compact fluorescents kept pinging.
Did they? They
kept breaking. And we had to keep replacing them, and we had issues with harmonics. And in fact, the supplier changed every single one in a shed twice because of the harmonics issues we were having. And in the end, we took them out and put the same LEDs in that we'd put in the Scottish operation, which was really quite disappointing. Yeah. What the LEDs did. I mean, this is old hat. You'll have heard this story before, I'm sure. But what the LEDs did that the previous SONs didn't do was they came on immediately. And again, compact fluorescents don't come on immediately, and that was a huge saving. And if you think about so what happens is you're in and out of sheds, so people just leave the lights on,
right?
Because you can't turn the light. You can't go in, turn the light on, and then come back 20 minutes later to do the work you need to do. And so the best example of that was in the workshops in one of the ports, in the Port of Leith. And the port engineer there was really up for trying new fittings. And so I got a couple on test, and we put them above the electrician's belt, the electrician's bench rather, which seemed like a good idea given they were going to have to fit them all to get their feedback as to how it went. And we were doing a lot of night shift work at the time, and the electrician the next day was absolutely over the moon. He said, I can now see what colour of cable I'm working with.
Oh my God, okay. God.
He said, I can see at a glance. Previously I had to get my phone out and shine a torch on it to get...
And funnily enough, that's quite important for an electrician, isn't it?
It makes his job a lot easier. It makes his job a lot easier. So he was over the moon. And the other change it made was the guys would come in, switch the workshop lights on, and then go and have a cup of tea for half an hour because you had to wait on the lights warming up.
Oh, God.
So the improvement in productivity was fantastic. And it also meant that, a bit further down the line, we put daylight harvesting on and, so on and so forth, and motion sensors and... which further cut the use. But in the feed sheds, what really made the difference was on these old SON fittings, because it's food, you had to have a protective plastic layer over the light in case the bulb blew.
Oh yeah,
or the luminaire blew.
Of course.
Because you can't have glass in food stuff, obviously.
No.
And the heat of these SON lamps would melt the plastic from the inside, and so they would become more and more opaque, and eventually reach a stage where they needed replaced because there wasn't enough light coming through. Now, to replace a lamp in a shed that's full of feed is a really big job because you've got to take it all out. You might have 10,000 tonnes of feed in there. That's a lot of product to move that someone's got to take, with a front end loader and put in a truck and move to another shed just to change these plastic covers. So we reckoned actually these lights paid for themselves many times over, not just in electrical savings, not just in not having to replace blown luminaires, but just alone from not having to replace these plastic protective sleeves.
Oh my goodness. So when you said that the heat did that wouldn't have caused a fire risk though, would it as well?
No. It's just a gradual degradation of the plastic. It's not really melting. It's just it causes an opacity.
Do you know what? I think I know exactly the kind that you're talking about, because we've had two lights in the house very similar to that, where they've got lighter and lighter and lighter, and we could not hardly see anything. So you're kind of going in and going, I've got no idea what's in here. So yeah, we've had proper all LEDs replacing them, which makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It makes a huge difference, and we put a huge amount of research into which manufacturer to go for. Without wanting to bore you, but lots of manufacturers around that time scale were offering 5 and 10 year warranties, but lots of manufacturers were lasting 2 years and then going bust. So we kind of actually, one of the things we did was, through discussions with lots of other ports, we kind of had a lessons learnt session, and we all picked each other's brains and went, that didn't work. Oh, right, you've done that. And so as you do, and that's where the learning is, isn't it? So one of the things I learnt from that was to only go with a manufacturer that's got an insurance-backed warranty. Yeah,
I can imagine. Goodness me.
Which is a very valuable lesson.
So what are you doing at the moment down in? So you're in Gravesend at the moment, aren't you? Is it a bit secret squirrel, or are you allowed to tell us what you're doing down there?
Well, I've been doing some work with the environment team, preparing them for the incoming Director of Sustainability. So I've just handed the team over to the incoming to the new Director of Sustainability. So that's good. That team are all settled with their new director, and I've moved on to head up strategic projects. And so we've got a range of them that I can't really talk about yet, because they're all in this vessel decarbonisation space, but they're either alternative fuels or autonomous vessels or battery electric vessels, and so it's exciting stuff.
Yeah. So right, okay. So you've just said battery electric vessels. Now, what size are we looking at? The ones that are already floating out and about on the seas, the shore, wherever, what size are we talking about? Because from what you're saying, we can't go to battery electric for a cruise ship or a container ship, can we? Because that's just mental.
No, absolutely. You'd be towing another ship behind with the battery in it. So, no, these are at the smaller end of the scale. These are the sorts of vessels that would rarely leave the harbour waters. Right,
okay. So something that's pootling around a little bit?
Yeah, so workboats, small passenger vessels, those kind of things, survey vessels, the sorts of things that, harbours operate, or that would operate within a harbour.
Yeah, okay. And what kind of... So... Are we looking at Are you looking at the 2050? Because I'm just thinking we've got 2050 is the date for kind of full decarbonisation, net zero, isn't it? Is that is the timeline right for the shipping industry? Do you think?
So international shipping, I think, has agreed to drop its emissions by 50% by 2050.
Okay.
What the UK government is seeking is for UK domestic shipping to be carbon neutral by 2050. Of course, carbon neutral doesn't mean zero carbon.
No.
There might be some offsetting in there, perhaps, which obviously is another can of worms that we'll maybe leave out of this podcast.
I've spoken to a couple of people on that one.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in that, go and watch those podcasts.
Yeah.
You can plug them later. So that's the vision at the moment. I suspect that timeline will change. What I've been working with various organisations on is how they get to that zero carbon place. And here in the PLA, the Port London Authority, all of their own vessels have transitioned to HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil. So it's essentially a majority biodiesel. And that's reduced carbon emissions and air quality emissions significantly, which is fantastic. Everyone understands that that's a transition fuel. That's a solution for 5 to 10 years until we can get on board with battery electric or hydrogen or whatever else it may be. And that's why Port London has taken quite a forward-looking stance with the Hydrogen Highway project and getting involved in trying to support organisations bidding for funds from the government in relation to alternative fuelled vessels that would operate in a harbour.
No, that's really interesting to kind of know that, like I say, it's something that I hadn't actually thought about until we started talking about it. And it's hard enough thinking of, I know it's looking at the 2050. I'm not even going to work out how old I am. I'm going to be in that year because I don't want to think about it like that. But but actually moving a whole industry like the shipping industry to net zero, this it's inch by inch, isn't it? Really, rather than, it's not a step change. This is it really? You're doing lots of continuous improvement.
Definitely gradual.
Yeah,
and most organisations don't want to be the first adopter.
Why is that then?
They want to be the second adopter.
What, in case it goes wrong first time?
Because they want to learn. Yeah, they want to learn from what everyone else does.
Yeah, there's got to be somebody who puts their hand up and goes, "Come on, I'm here. Let me have a go." Exactly.
And that's the point of this pot of money that the UK government came up with after COP26 is to take some of the risk out of these initiatives and hopefully back some winners that drive trade for the UK and put the UK in a strong place to be an exporter of these technologies, or at least an exporter of the knowledge. And so that's quite a cool place to be, isn't it?
So right, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Is it easy to apply for this funding? Are the ports finding it easy? Because you know what it's like, and I've seen some of the stuff that on the electric vehicle side of things. I've seen some of the kind of the documents that people are having to produce. So and you're talking about in a lot of situations, people have never had to do this. So I suppose they need somebody like you, don't they, to actually kind of help them through this process and guide them and support them, etc.
Yeah, so the process is, as it has to be in any grant application, fairly bureaucratic, because you need to be able to assess whether the project is likely to be successful or not. The biggest hurdle is the timescale. So there's give or take about 3 months the call has been open. But 3 months isn't a huge amount of time to devise a project, create your consortium, work out the costs. I mean, you'll struggle to get a grid connection and grid, and decent budget costs for your grid connection and substations and all that kind of thing in that time scale. Never mind anything else. You need to kind of understand what your staff costs are going to be, your capital costs, and your operating costs, and whether indeed you want to operate this, whatever the initiative is, at the point where it happens. And all of the money has to be spent by March 2025 on this latest call.
Cool. That's not a long time, is it? Really?
So if you're designing and building a new alternative fueled vessel, you need to design it, find a shipbuilder, a naval architect, a shipbuilder, an engine manufacturer, a fuel supply chain, and have it built by March 2025.
Right. Okay, I'll just get some off the shelf stuff happening here, you know. It's just...
So, pressure drives invention.
Well, I suppose. And how long, I don't know whether you know this, how long's the turnaround for you to actually put the grant funding, you know, funding request in, and for it to actually be turned around to say, yay, you've got it?
It's actually quite quick. So in summer we'll hear whether, you know, who's got the money and who hasn't. And then, you know, it starts in earnest in October.
So hang on, so you've only got kind of 18 months, 24 months to actually put this all in?
18 months to build and then 3 years to operate thereafter.
Oh my God. Oh, well, good luck to you. My God. Well, you're going to have your hands full then, aren't you, really?
You've got to love a challenge.
Gotta love a challenge, and this is definitely a challenge. Right, so how do people find you, Derek? If people are, you know, if we've got people who are listening and watching that are interested in talking to Dr. Derek McGlashan about sustainability in ports and shipping and the like, how do they find you? Where's the best place?
LinkedIn's probably the best place because, funnily enough, there aren't many McGlashans out there.
No. But there's a few. Nobody else came up when I was searching for you anyway. You are a unique entity.
Well, when I was an academic, your citation becomes your initials in your name, and there was an academic in Australia that had the same initials who often got asked questions from me, and vice versa.
Oh my God.
And given he was a fish biologist,
A bit different.
I couldn't help.
No, funny that.
Yeah, I couldn't help.
So LinkedIn is the best place to find you. Anywhere else? Are you on any other social media, or is it mostly LinkedIn?
Don't have time for any other social media, Liz.
No, blooming heck. I'm surprised you're not. Yeah, you won't have any time. Right, okay. So best place for everybody is LinkedIn. Find him on there. And yeah, that's how we kind of connected anyway, isn't it? So we were talking on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so just to finish off, I just want to say thank you. It's been really, really interesting to find out about this, and I can't wait to see how you're getting on with all of these projects. I'm hoping you've got lots of plates to spin them on.
We've got various sticks around the office just to put these plates on. Yeah.
Oh, listen, I hope everybody else has really enjoyed listening or watching as well. So it's been brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And so
Thanks, Liz.
so I'm going to end with just saying, check him out. Check him out on LinkedIn. And thank you everybody for watching and listening. And thank you, Derek. Really, really appreciated. I'm going to say I shall see you next time. Thanks then. Bye. You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.